Hi, second graders. Today we are doing the deep dive for Module 3, Lesson 14. You will need your blue workbook and a pencil. Today we are going to focus on how do writers choose between adjectives and adverbs. We have a couple sentences to start with. The first sentence says, a mob stood outside the school yelling at Ruby. A big crowd of people that want to be violent is called a mob. Is the underlined word, mob, a noun, a person, place, or thing, or is it a verb, an action word? The word underlined is a noun. So we are going to add an adjective to describe the mob. Now, if the mob is standing outside the school yelling at Ruby Bridges, does that mean they're very nice? No. So what words could we use to describe the mob? We could use the word angry, scary, mean, or even loud since they're yelling. So we could say, an angry mob stood outside the school yelling at Ruby. Or a scary mob stood outside the school yelling at Ruby. Or a mean mob stood outside the school yelling at Ruby. Or a loud mob stood outside the school yelling at Ruby. When we add an adjective before the word mob, it adds more details to your writing. Let's try the second sentence. Ruby walked to school. Now, after reading our Ruby Bridges book, we know that she didn't just walk to school happily. How did Ruby walk to school? Walked is an action word. It's something that we can do. So we use an adverb to describe the word walked. Some words we could use are bravely, confidently. If you remember that painting that we saw of Ruby Bridges walking with the marshals, she was walking with confidence. She was walking slowly to make sure she was safe, or even quickly to get past the mob. So let's try putting those words before the word walked. Ruby bravely walked to school. Does that change the way you picture Ruby walking? It does. So adding an adverb in front of our verb walked gives us a better picture in our head. Okay, why do writers use adjectives and adverbs? Why would someone who's writing add one of these words in front of mob or one of these words in front of walked? Well, writers choose adjectives to give more detail about people, places, or things. Writers choose adverbs to give more detail about actions. Remember, writers use adjectives to describe nouns and adverbs to describe verbs. You are now going to turn to handout 14B in your blue book. 14B says experiment with adjectives and adverbs. An adjective answers the question, what kind? And adverbs answer the question, how? Instead of pulling a card to decide what word we're going to use, I have the words listed to the side. So we're going to read through these words first. We have Ruby, student, problem, Mrs. Henry, children, learned, teacher, stand, yelled, and play. Some of these words are nouns, people, places, or things, and some of them are verbs, action words. So our first one we're going to do is play. So our word card is play. We're going to write that on the blank, play. Then we're going to circle, is play a noun or a verb? Play is a verb. It's an action word. We're going to add a descriptive word to play. And since it's a verb, our descriptive word is going to be an adverb. So think about how the children play in our Ruby Bridges book on the playground. And we're going to say nicely. They play nicely. Oops, I misspelled that. That's okay. Nicely. Now my sentence I'm going to write is the children play nicely on the playground. And this is towards the end of the book when all the children come back to school and realize, you know what? We should all be able to go to school together. So we have our verb, play, and how do they play? They play nicely. So nicely describes how they play. Let's pick one more. And if you would like to do this on your own, you can choose different words. You do not have to use the same words as me. Since we already used a verb, let's do an excuse me. Our word teacher. Teacher is a person, so that's going to be a noun. Now, when we describe nouns, we use an adjective. What kind of teacher did Ruby Bridges have? She had a kind teacher, and that was Mrs. Henry. So for our sentence, we can write Mrs. Well, actually, since Mrs. Henry was already a word, we'll just stick with teacher. The kind teacher helped Ruby. So the word kind describes the teacher. Okay, once you have finished that page, take a picture of it and add it to your seesaw. If you want to use different words instead of play and teacher, you are welcome to do so.